As I write these lines, I am a combatant in Indochina. I drink much less for a long time and even vaguely think about reorganizing my life. I feel married to the military organization to which I belong, but I don't have the courage to desert. For the first time since what happened that night, it seems to me that I am reaching a certain serenity that allows me to ask some questions without going crazy. I thought the girl was wearing black, probably because of the father, although I seem to remember that this girl had always dressed like that. Then it was still possible to have a hope. But how to ask him? What if it awakened a sad sleeping memory in her? He drank a drink that tasted magical, like those Proust cupcakes, or the sensation Cocteau described in his opium when he returned to his childhood neighborhood. And as his fingers brushed the wall of the street at the height of the child, the melody of memory sounded, as on a gramophone. This wine was, of course, the same as always, the wine of the country. There was nothing strange about it being the same, nor that its taste, associated with so many ancient things, should awaken some sleeping ghosts. He was helping me with it. That atmosphere in which the presence of the military was noticeable, that officer writing a letter in front of a mug of beer, and in which, at first glance, the dim light. I thought I recognized an old comrade in uniform. There was nothing unusual about it either. I ordered another glass and then another. Then I belatedly realized how fond of the drink he had been in other times. Only now it seemed to me that the wine hurt me and upset my stomach. I think now that it was surely the wine that made me finally ask the girl with feigned ease, and that it was her father's. "Where is it in there?" "Finishing dinner." The girl answered me, "This is coming right now." It was magnificent, and I decided to order another glass and drink it, exalted to the health of the incorruptible, and in tribute to old Parmenides, whose poem I tried to remember in vain. Then I looked again at the officer who wrote the letter and thought again, but now more strongly, that he looked a lot like my friend the lieutenant. R. The one who died in the bombardment, and whose gaze, absent from the empty officer's quarter, now pierced me again, shuddering. It was a lacerating illusion. I stared at him, and he seemed to feel my gaze on the back of his neck. The fact is that he turned in annoyance towards me, but when he saw me his face brightened frankly, and I realized that it was indeed him. R, because it was him. Sure enough, his lips moved and words rang out, the tone of which I recognized. Although now I did seem to notice something strange. The movement of the lips did not exactly correspond to the words spoken at first, as if there was a slight mismatch. Sometimes something similar is noticeable in film screenings, but this mismatch was corrected immediately, and everything began to work without any glitch. Lieutenant R had called me by name and promised to finish his letter soon and join me for drinks and chat. Troubled, I accepted to give me time to meditate on what was happening to me, on the rare characteristics of that drunkenness. The girl invited me, as was her custom, on account of the house, and I froze in terror as I noticed my limp arm on the counter, the sheath that wrapped it. It was a uniform sleeve on which the gold insignia of a lieutenant glowed dimly, so I was not able to notice the gentleman's departure. P. to the tavern, until I heard his voice, commenting with his usual humor something about war, scarcity, and the prices of things. I raised my head very slowly to see something in his face that would bring me out of this dreadful illusion in which I was sinking. But the shipwreck continues hopelessly. Mr. P was the same old man as ever, smoking his storied pipe with youthful delight. "So what, Lieutenant? How are things going with the war? The front is stabilizing." I tried to say something politely, but I didn't know anything about it. Perhaps I knew it, because the wine had dazed me. Perhaps because a long time had passed since the events about which I was being asked. I outlined a stupid stammering, and Mr. Perez saw the degree of intoxication understood, so he left me in peace discreetly, taking a puff on his heather pipe and expelling the smoke spaciously. When Lieutenant R joined me, giving me an affectionate pat on the back, I invited him without looking at him, and he drank beside me without me telling him. And that's when, finally, the alarm siren sounded. I was no longer able to go out to the barracks. R later told me that I had collapsed trying to get up. A motorcyclist with a siren had rushed past the tavern, and thanks to this, we had been saved from death the next day, during the hangover from that terrible drunkenness. I heard that the barracks had been destroyed by bombs, and that the wall of the officers' pavilion had collapsed, but no one could tell me if anyone was inside the bar. When the catastrophe occurred, our unit was transferred, and I was punished for dereliction of duty and absent from the barracks during the holding service that I was performing that night. When I tried to explain what happened, it was no longer possible. The year was 1938, and I couldn't be a post-war playwright. R died a little later at the front, and I was admitted to a hospital for nerves somewhere next to the Mediterranean. When the end of the war approached, I moved to France, where I suffered the rigors of a concentration camp guarded by Senegalese, until I got a small day job in a small town in the east, next to the German border, framed in the ranks, the French resistance I formed at the head of the companies that at the end of the liberation entered that city that I cannot say. No doubt I abused the drink all these years, because by the time I realized the danger, it was too late. I had become an alcoholic. People knew me more than anything else, my drunkenness and my absurd stories, brutalized. I joined the Legion when there was a demand for cannon fodder for Indochina. As I write these lines, I am a combatant in Indochina. I drink much less for a long time, and even vaguely think about reorganizing my life. I feel married to the military organization to which I belong, but I don't have the courage to desert. For the first time since what happened that night, it seems to me that I am reaching a certain serenity that allows me to ask some questions without going crazy. At first I always did it with the screams that once took me to the hospital. Then I decided to protect myself by remaining silent, but despite everything, I think it has always been noticeable to me, no matter how many efforts I have made to hide it. The secret? Although I have to say that people for a few years have almost always considered my oddities in a benevolent way. I have a reputation for being withdrawn, and that's it, sometimes from memory. I have tried to reconstruct my dramatic works, and I explain my failure by the fact that my memory was never very powerful, except to remember everything that could make me suffer for their loss. Therefore, the result has always been unsatisfactory. I've only managed to write vague approximations, some rambling and meaningless scenes. As for imagining new works, I haven't even been able to think of such a thing. I was recently assigned to my company to a Spaniard. When I asked him about my published books, he declared that he had never heard of them, or, of course, of me. By the way, this boy died during the last action. A grenade has shattered his skull. His body is buried a few meters from where I am writing. I write over an ammunition box by candlelight at a time when the front is silent. I think of Spain. I don't know what's going on there. Alcohol, misery, prisons, war, and flight have been the barriers of my separation from my country since I crossed the Pyrenees one March morning in an atmosphere of collective terror. No, I don't know what's happened there since I ran away. I don't know what's happening now. I begin to think and imagine that everything will probably be as I have experienced it, but that I will be missing, that everything will be the same, but without me, and that if I returned I would recognize everything the same, but without me, or with me I mean, or with someone who fulfills my function, who has my friends, who writes my dramas. I say this because some time ago I learned by chance that a young writer had released a drama. Anti-war. Who is that young writer? What's his name? What is the title of your work? Mine was The Squad of the Dead, but as I said before, I haven't been able to reconstruct it. In any case, there is someone who is doing for me what I did. I mean, I don't know how to express what I would have done. Many times the humor of applause resonates in my ears. If that were the case, perhaps I could consider myself, as I am also doing here, complicated in a colonial war that seems odious to me. And yet I like to think that I am missing, that my absence is noticeable, that I have been mysteriously extracted from this world, and that my absence has produced a void, at least in the hearts of my friends. I think, for example, that Dr. H exists. He has won a place in philosophy in the small town, and if everything is like that, he would recognize me if I introduced myself right now. But what do I mean right now in front of him? Is it genuinely true that I am missing in that world? I'll be greatly missed in it, and I'll be thought to have mysteriously disappeared. My body might have been thoroughly searched for, my obituaries could have been published, or perhaps I have never been there, but neither have my friends from the gathering. Will they also feel deep anguish now from another exile? I write these profound questions with that tranquility that, as I mentioned, I have only recently achieved. Besides, it's the mishap that landed me in the mental hospital. I've learned to be cautious, almost cautious with others. My plan, anyway, is to get back there if I get out of this war alive. Rifle fire now? There may be dancing tonight. I will disembark if possible near the small and quiet university town, and I will go in a closed car so as not to look at anything at the tavern, because I know that there is no other entrance for me and that everything else. The capital where I achieve my moderate successes, my home, would be, if I addressed it directly, like a horrible wall that would crush me, the wall of the alien, of the strange and the unknown. I will enter, as I say, the little tavern, sir. P will have died, and I will rejoice in it and drink to the corruptible being, and in tribute to the old and dark Heraclitus. And they will have made reforms, and the girl will no longer be, but an obese woman who will not remember me at all. Nor will I remind you, of course. Then I will go to sleep at the hotel, where I am sure I have reserved a room for rest, my conversation with the young people, and the little mental effort that my lecture has involved. I must have mentally prepared her on the train for not doing it. It has worked. It seems slow and repetitive to me. I hope that in the morning early when I go to the station, my friend Dr. H will be there, waiting to say goodbye, and I will return after this strange exile. My business endeavors, my theater productions, my personal belongings.
Yo soy la guardiana de las sombras.
Y yo el narrador fantasma. Te invitamos a suscribirte y a que mires estos otros videos.
No olvides activar la campana para no perderte ninguno de nuestros relatos. Y si te ha gustado, comparte con tus amigos.
Esperamos que tus noches sean un viaje a lo desconocido y tus sueños un eco de nuestras historias.